Here's a tutorial of how to make a polymer clay magnet, and the magnet we're going to be making is a lollipop. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind before we get started is the size in which you want to make this lollipop. You want it so that way it will cover the magnet. So whatever magnet you're using, make sure you make the lollipop at least a bit bigger, so that way when you look at it from the front, you won't be able to see the magnet in the back. Now this next step, we're gonna have our transparency. So these are the transparencies that they used to use on the overhead projectors. This step is only necessary if you don't really have a flat surface. So you can see, like, if you're working on, like, for example, a textured surface, you don't want to roll your clay on a textured surface because it's going to pick up that texture, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to use your transparency as a surface, and we can just cut out a small square to be our working surface. So now we're going to choose our two colors. So any two colors work. You can see on this one I used red and white. You could even use 3 colors, but just for simplicity we're going to use 2. So the next one I'm going to make, I'll use blue and red. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to roll these into thin lines. Okay, so on top of your transparency or your smooth surface, you're just going to roll it. And now that you have one thin strip, you can move on to the other color. So the other color, you want to roll it into about the same thickness or same length. If you have more on the other one, you could just peel it off so that the lengths match. And it's better to have these longer than what you need than to have them shorter, and you'll see what I mean after. So like I said, you want them to be around the same length. This is pretty close. You see that the red one is a bit longer, so maybe we can just peel off a bit of the red so that way they match. All right. And now the next step is going to be just to press them together. Okay, so that way they're stuck together. And then we're gonna now roll this into a cylinder. So it's a cylinder with it's gonna be one strip, but it's gonna have 2 colors. Okay, so we just use the same method. Okay, kind of press down on it and just roll it. Okay, so you can see now you have a strip that is about half red and half blue. Okay, and now you can start twisting it. So it doesn't have to be completely even. You can see some of the parts are big, some of the parts are small. That, in my opinion, actually makes it look nicer, so it's not just a perfect spiral. And once you have it twisted, okay, you don't want it to uncoil, okay, so you can once again just press down and just roll it a bit. Okay, so now that that is finished, maybe I want to do one more swirl over here. Okay, so now we can get to the part where we roll the lollipop. Okay, so keeping this on the table, because you don't want to roll, when you roll the spiral, you want to keep it flat. Okay, you don't want certain parts to be like higher than the others, so we're going to keep it flat the whole time, and we're just going to roll it like this. Okay, now don't press it tightly yet. Okay, now we're going to make the handle of the lollipop. Okay, so now we're going to make the handle of the lollipop. So this is a toothpick, and we're just going to cut the toothpick in half. So I'm going to use these wire cutters, but you can just use scissors as well. Okay, so one toothpick, you could probably actually make 2 lollipops because you're only using half of the toothpick. So now what we're going to do is we are going to look at the size in which we want to make a lollipop. Okay, so if we look at the size, for example, you can make it any size, but I think this size works better, where about half of this toothpick sticks out and the other half is in the lollipop. That way it's the handle is less likely to get pulled out. So if we measure ours right now, we can see that it is about that size. We can kind of coil this a little bit more. And this is what I mean by you want to have more. You want to make it longer than you need, because in case you make it if you make it too big, all you need to do is just uncoil it and maybe peel off a little, and just peel off this strip to make it a bit shorter, and you can control the size that way. But if you don't have enough and you make it too small, you might have to restart all over and use 2 new strips of polymer clay in order to get it to the right size. So this, I would say, is actually pretty close to the right size. That's just by accident. Usually I would have to adjust it, but we can see that when we put the toothpick up to the popsicle, about half of it sticks out and the other half sticks in. So that's perfect. So now we can take this off. Okay, and we can flatten this end of the spiral into the rest of it, and then we can just slowly roll it on its side just to make it a bit rounder. Okay, so now this is what we have. Okay, and we're gonna take our toothpick and we're gonna stick it in like that. That's what it's gonna look like. Now when you're pushing the toothpick in, do it slowly and carefully, because you don't want the toothpick to come out of the side. Okay, and I guess that means your strips shouldn't be too thin as well. So you're gonna poke the toothpick in from where the spiral ends. Okay, and that is gonna be our lollipop. We can use our fingers to shape it so it's a bit round again. And then now we're gonna bake it. So we're gonna bake this for 15 minutes at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. So keep that in mind. Don't bake it at 275 degrees Celsius because you're gonna burn the clay. And also keep in mind of where the heat is coming from your oven as well. If it comes from the bottom of your toaster oven, you probably don't want to put it right by where the heat is coming from. Maybe usually the middle rack is going to work out fine. Okay? So additionally, one thing that you also want to do before you bake it is you want to push where the handle or the toothpick goes in. You want to push this inwards together a little bit. Not so hard that you deform the whole popsicle, but just so that you actually have a snug fit of this toothpick. So when you bake the clay and it hardens, there won't be a huge hole where this can just slide in and out easily. So we've preheated our oven to 275 degrees Fahrenheit, and the timer is set at 15 minutes. So you can see I already have some of my other polymer clay creations, but now I'm gonna put the lollipop in. Okay, you don't need to use parchment paper for polymer clay. You can, but you don't have to. You can also just use an oven-proof plate. You could also just put it straight onto the baking tray as well. As long as you don't put it too close to the heat source of the oven. So for this oven, I know the heat comes from the top. So in that case, I wouldn't want to put it on, for example, maybe the very top rack. Now there isn't a top rack here. There's only one on the middle and one on the bottom. In this case, you could put it on the middle or the bottom, but you wouldn't want to put it right by the heat. Otherwise, you might risk burning it. So we'll come back in 15 minutes and see what we get. So our lollipops are now finished baking and they're hot, so you could take them out. So you can just take the tray out and let it cool like this. That will usually mean that it takes a bit longer to cool. If you want to, you could also remove the lollipops or whatever your creations are and put them on like a plate. That will let them cool faster just because the pan right now is probably still hot. But I'll just let them sit there. I'll just let them sit there and just let them cool first, and then after that we'll move on to the next step. So now we have our lollipop, and now we're gonna attach the magnet. Okay, so we're gonna look at the two sides now. I don't really like this side because you can see the toothpick got a bit too close to one end, so it kind of pushed the spirals. So I'm gonna choose to use this end as the end that we can see. So I'm gonna stick my magnet to this side. So all you're gonna need to do is use some super glue, and we'll apply it onto the lollipop. And the other thing, once that has dried, is you can add one drip or just a dab of super glue into where the handle meets the polymer clay. So this will prevent your handle from getting pulled out as easily. And these are the final product. So you have the magnet on the back, so you can just stick them to any whiteboard or the inside of your locker, anything that's magnetic.